And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Cody. Cody has had experiences with what he says is a female upright walking canine. He does not like to use the word dogman, which I try not to myself sometimes. But I'm definitely looking forward to talking with him. I saw his story on Facebook here recently, and I reached out to him, kind of talked to him off air a little bit, and decided to try and get him on here so he could share his experience with everyone. But before we bring him on, if you've ever had an experience and you would like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, you can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Either way will work, so just make sure to reach out to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. If you would like to help the podcast out, please continue to share it around. Word of mouth is one of the best ways to get the podcast out there to new listeners. For every new listener, there is a potential new guest, so just keep doing what you're doing. It's much appreciated. You can also help out by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts at. So just make sure to give it a good old click, and it helps out with the rankings, makes the podcast more discoverable. Don't forget to check out the Patreon. You get early access to all the episodes. They're all ad-free. There's 2 different tiers of the paid tier and the free tier. It's worth checking out. Get the exclusive content that's over there. Follow me around on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, that fun stuff. But now we're going to go ahead and bring Cody on. Again, we've been talking a little bit back and forth, and I wanted to get him on here, give him a chance to share his experience. It's definitely something that's a little different than the most common ones you hear out there, so I'm definitely looking forward to talking with him. And I hope you guys enjoy our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Cody. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
No problem.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
So, a lot of people don't believe me when I first tell them, but my name is Cody Laughing Wolf. It was the name given to me by my grandmother when I was born, and that's the name I prefer to go by. I don't really go by my state-issued, what I call a slave name. Anyways, I was raised in northeastern Oregon, where I still currently live, and where my encounter happened. I'm 36 years old now, and the original encounter happened when I was around 10. My grandma was Native American. She was what they call a bone lady, which is kind of like a female shaman or a witch doctor. She would read bones and, tell people their fortunes or what their babies were going to be, or help with baby births and whatnot for the families. And one thing that was never done to me that I feel like was done to everybody else was that everybody was told that there's no such thing as monsters, that there's really nothing out there that can hurt me or what can go bump in the night. I was never told that. I was always told to, be home before the street lights come on, and to stay in the house after dark, because there's things out there that are worse than people. And, I was raised like that pretty much my whole life because I was raised by my grandmother. Well, like I said earlier, being raised by her, we spent most of our time during the summer when I was in school and growing up, going camping, which was, we have national forests on three sides of us pretty much, and we're up right in the corner of Oregon, so we're just out in the sticks. Like, we have in this county, we have one of our biggest tourist attractions is Bigfoot, because we have a lot of sightings of Bigfoot around the area and up around the lake. We also have other things, like we have a lake monster that we call Wally. And, there's other things that we have here too that a lot of people don't speak about because, if you're not native in this area, of the native culture because this is native land. From my descent, my grandma, she was a full blood native. Her husband was a Norseman. His grandma was from Scandinavia, and that's where I get my bloodline. I'm pretty much a muddle of Native American and Norse mythology all mixed into one person. And I was never cut off from that. My grandma never cut me off from those because she believed that it was important that I knew what was out in the world. So getting to my encounter, when we were out camping one year, I think I was about 10. And when we would go camping, as soon as I had breakfast and everything and had, what little chores I had to do around the camp done, I was set loose. So I took off, running around in buckskins or shorts or whatever I was running around in. And what I remember most was I was about a mile and a half from camp. And this is up in the boonies, real deep in the woods, where my grandma preferred to camp because there was no people out there to bother her. Well, I run through this meadow and something caught my eye. I don't remember if it was movement or a shadow or what, but I stopped and I turned, and that's when I spotted what I call Sasha. And Sasha is, I don't like calling them dogmen because I've heard people that have encountered them before that have been quote unquote told that these creatures feel like it's an insult because one point they eat dogs, they'll eat canines. My grandma called them wolf people. My grandma told me that the wolf people stay in an area deep in the woods, which I know where that is, but I don't tell people. To stay away from that area because it's their territory. And they're very territorial creatures, but the males more so than the females. Back to my encounter, when I looked over, standing at the edge of the meadow, at the edge of the trees with one hand on a tree, was a female. And I've always been fearless when it comes to animals. Nothing scares me. I've been face to face with bears. Anything you can think of, it doesn't scare me because 9 times out of 10, things like that are more scared of me than I am of them. So I took a few steps closer, and when I did that, she made, I don't know if you know what this is, but I call it a chuffing noise. It's like a hoof, like a half a bark.
Mm-hmm.
She made a couple noises like that, dropped down to all fours, and loped off into the woods, which I could have followed, but my curiosity had turned to a need for understanding and honestly a little bit of fear at that point because at that point, my brain was just blown because I'd never seen anything stand up like that except for in movies. And mind you, I've seen almost every werewolf type media that there is to be had because after this point, it became an obsession because I had no idea what I had seen. So I ran back to my grandma, and at this point is when she told me about the wolf people and, to avoid them pretty much at all costs, you know, because they could be a threat. Well, understanding that, I stayed a little closer to camp the rest of that day, but I was always uneasy. The rest of that day, I was very uneasy, like I was being watched. Well, ended up going to sleep, and the next morning, I had woken up early. It was still, around 6 or 7 in the morning, and I had to go out to relieve myself, which, being the person I am, I just walked out into the brush a ways from camp to relieve myself. Well, as I was standing there doing my business, I had like a tingling up my spine. And I, put myself away and slowly turned around, and standing right behind me, and I'm talking like, not like 15 feet, I'm talking like a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet behind me, was this 6 foot tall female dogman or wolf person or whatever you want to call him right now. And she was just staring at me. And now, mind you, at this point in my life, I had never had a haircut. So my hair went down to about midway down my back, and it was always in a braid. Unless I was sleeping, which I would undo my hair. Well, with my hair undone, I was kind of the disheveled, just woke up look. Sasha reached out. Sasha's what I call her, by the way. Sasha reached out, took my hair in between her thumb and finger, and looked at it before sniffing it. And that's when I heard my grandma say, "Don't move." At that point, Sasha turned, looked at my grandma, looked back at me, let go of my hair, dropped down to all fours, and ran off into the brush, only stopping long enough to look back at the both of us before leaving. That just sealed it. Like, she became one of the most potent memories in my mind. And for the rest of that summer, that camping trip at least, I was never outside without being able to feel like I was watched. Now, this happened when I was about 10, and it wasn't long after that I had some issues and was locked up for a while. And I didn't get out till maybe 2001, 2002. For the rest of that time, I spent taking care of my grandma, and up until she passed away in 2011. Now, when my grandma passed away, it broke me mentally. And my mother came and took me away. Well, through the next couple of years, we ended up moving all the way to Utah, where I ended up pretty much getting stuck until 2020. When COVID hit us real bad and things started shutting down, me and my roommate and her old man and their 2 kids had ended up being evicted out of our house in that real short window when you could be evicted before they replaced that thing where you couldn't be evicted because of COVID. Well, when we got evicted, I decided that it was best, even though I didn't want to leave my best friend, I knew that it would be better for them as a family if I left and went back home. So I got on the first bus and got myself here back to the county. Well, about a year after I got back, I ended up taking a day trip up with a friend of mine to near the place where the original encounter happened. And nothing really exciting happened. There was no, there wasn't another encounter or anything. It was just pretty much me showing things that I knew off. But when I got back, a few months went by, and I had heard strange things around my living area, and I didn't really think anything of it because at that time I lived in a little trailer park. Well, I ended up moving out of the trailer park and into a house right on the outskirts of the town that I live in, which is just a little bit bigger than the town which I was raised in, which is only, 30 miles from here. It was at that point that I started noticing more strange things. I have, I have just a little single wide trailer, and if it's quiet, I can hear what's going on outside just as well as if I was outside myself, because my walls aren't very thick. But I chalked a bunch of it up to, not knowing my surroundings, this and that, and just kind of ignoring it. Until the past year, when I started spending more time outside, and when I started noticing her again. And it confused me so bad because, I'm still not sure how she was able to track me down, even though I've heard that these things can track people for miles. I'm confused about why it's me and why she seemed to have picked me, because everything that I've heard says that most females in packs are very well protected and stay around dens to tend to juveniles. Also, I somewhat unknowingly, because I have really bad ADHD, so I have to be crafty. Like, that's part of my main personality is I'm crafty. Well, I would find either unusually straight sticks or sticks that caught my attention, or other type things like rocks or bones or just the most random things, either on my porch or close to my front porch or back porch. So I would just, absentmindedly pick them up and bring them in the house to make things out of them. And then I would hang these things outside because, as I've told a couple people, I'm kind of naturally a witchy, kind of secluded hermit of a person. But I take my knowledge and my craft, and I will make things like bone chimes or, hanging artwork or whatnot, and just put it outside. But if it goes missing, it doesn't raise my eyebrows, because in my head I feel like if they needed it more than I did, then it must have been meant for them. Well, this past year, I ended up making a set of bone chimes. And not long after I put them out, which has, been a couple, 3 months ago now, when I set them out, my bone chimes went missing. I didn't really think anything of it. My best friend, who lives just a couple houses from me here in the same area, and also works with me at our work. We work at the same place, so it's beneficial for us to be really good friends, because I don't have a car. I don't like to drive. He has a car, and because we work on the same shifts, we just carpool. Well, when my bone chimes went missing, I remembered that he had told me a story once that he had heard something outside. And it confused him because he thought he heard a growl, and then he heard what sounded like wooden chimes clanking together. Well, it didn't click for me until I had talked to another friend of mine about my bone chimes coming up missing. And she told me that Sasha probably took them. And that's when it dawned on me that wood chimes and bone chimes sound almost identical to somebody who isn't around them all the time. And at that point is when I realized that, okay, there's more to this than what I've been thinking about. And maybe it's time I get some information. And that's when I started contacting a couple of these different dogman groups and talking to some of these other experts. Honestly, this is the first podcast I've been on, mostly because I'm just naturally distrustful of people. I'm not looking for a paycheck. I'm not looking for recognition. Yeah, you can know my name, but I'm not going to tell you exactly where I'm at, because I care more about Sasha than I do 90% of anybody that's listening to this. I totally understand that that there are people out there that only want these creatures' benefit, but that also says to me that there's people out here who are either looking for a paycheck or looking for a weapon. And that's not me. Most of all, what I want is for Sasha to be safe and to understand why Sasha is here. Like, I didn't ask for this. I wasn't looking for anything like this. But now that I know she's here, it's obvious. And I want to do everything I can to understand her more than anything, because I don't want her to leave. Like, some people are like, oh, what am I going to do? I just want this thing to go away. I don't want her to go away. If she's here for a reason. And that's exactly what I believe. One minor point to all this, I guess you'd call it like an update. About the same time my bone chimes went missing. It was pretty hot, and I had left my back door open and fallen asleep on my bed, which is right by my back door. I woke up to my dog growling and pressing herself against me, because my dog Lacey is a coward. She doesn't deal well with confrontation. She'd rather just run. At that point, I woke up and I looked at my door, and my bedside lamp was just enough light to illuminate my door, and I saw what I can only describe as like, if you've ever seen a raccoon's hand, that's exactly what these creatures' hands look like, except on a colossal scale. And one of her hands was gripped on my door frame. Well, I sleep with a pretty heavy revolver sitting right by my bed. And I grabbed it and, not being fully aware of, what the intentions of this encounter were, I pulled the hammer back and I said loudly, "Do not come in my house. You're not welcome in here." And at that point, the hand let go, and I believe she left. Um, and I didn't hear her for a couple of weeks. But, after I had some conversations with people, I've started leaving out gifts of, small trinkets and stones and raw chicken because I have an abundance of chicken in my freezer, but I don't eat chicken because I have this weird phobia about cooking it in my own home. So I just leave it outside for Sasha, and she's been taking it, and the sounds and vocalizations and whatnot have just skyrocketed in the past couple of months. So that's about everything up to now. And a lot of people ask me, "Well, when's the last time you had an encounter?" Honestly, Sasha was here last night. Like within the last 12 hours, I've heard her outside almost constantly from sundown to sunup. And, I've been outside a couple of times with my dog. I take her outside and I'll sit in a chair, wait for her to be done with her business. I've seen Sasha outside just watching. She doesn't really act aggressive. She doesn't try to get close to me at all. But she does watch me and she does vocalize to make sure that I know that she's there. And from that's about it, other than my dog still being a coward and running. But yeah, that's it.
Do you happen to, I know a lot of people ask this question to me, so I'm going to ask you,
Right.
have you tried to capture any sort of evidence of her, like video or photos or anything?
That's a really good question. About a month and a half ago, I bought just just a your run of the mill cheap infrared trail cam, and had my neighbor help me put it on my roof by my bedroom. And when I did that, and this is something I've been told, is that these creatures they like what they like and they don't like what they don't like. And if they don't like something, they'll usually destroy it. Well, let me just say that I got it up and I had it active, and I went to bed that night, and the next morning I found my trail cam looking like somebody had picked it up and squeezed it and smashed it on my front porch, which is all the way across the house from where I had originally set it up. And the only thing I can figure is that she jumped up on the roof and grabbed it from behind and smashed it, because she is not one to be photographed. She's extremely camera shy, and every time I've tried to pull out my camera, she's either growled at me or just disappeared.
I've always found it strange when I hear others talk about, even not so much with dogmen or upright walking canines or Sasquatch or anything otherworldly to an extent, but they always seem to know what a camera is. and how do they destroy them or avoid them, or and I've always questioned, like, how do they know? Like,
Um,
how would they know what those things are?
that plagued me for a while too, until I talked with a lady from the UK, and she believes that these creatures may be, she doesn't really understand the whole supernatural aspect of it. And even though I have a greater knowledge, I do not believe that they're solely a supernatural creature. I believe they may have more connection to the spirit world or whatnot. But what she told me is that these creatures are more intelligent than we give them credit for. Just because they don't speak to us with their mouths doesn't mean they're not intelligent. And something else that kind of hit me was, and this might make you laugh, but I was watching Star Wars Episode 1, and there's a quote in there when Obi-Wan asks Qui-Gon Jinn, he says, well, this creature can't be very smart, talking about Jar Jar Binks. And Qui-Gon Jinn says, the ability to speak doesn't make you intelligent. And that spoke to me greatly because this woman believes that the main way that these creatures communicate is, are you okay? What's going on? Sorry, my dog. Are you fine? Did you drink too fast? Quit it. Okay, calm down. Um, she believes that these creatures speak telepathically through what she calls mind speak. And it's more like maybe a short, garbled sentence, or don't lick my phone, or maybe images. The things that I get mostly are images into my head. But like I said before, I have really bad ADHD, and sometimes that kind of stuff gets pushed aside and I forget about it.
I'm trying to think, like, I haven't really heard too many encounters from anyone else that have ever talked about females for the most part. It's always been like a male. Well,
Right,
they're usually more aggressive or whatever, and everyone relates that to the males. What made
right.
this stand out to you that it was female? How could you tell the difference that it was a female from a
Oh,
male?
that's also a really good question because other people have asked me that too. Because they're like, well, how did you know? Well, here's the big thing for me. Stop that. Be good. Stop licking stuff. The big thing for me was when I saw her on the edge of the meadow, standing there looking at me. She she had breasts. She has, they're not large. They're not, like a big voluptuous woman. They're just she's got like little AB cut breasts. And that's the thing that differentiated her from, say, a male dogman, because uh, I've heard hundreds of encounters of males. Uh, I've heard people talk about, yeah, this thing was, more well endowed than me, and it's kind of shocking. Um, I've I've heard a couple encounters with females. There's a lady, I think she's in Missouri, who has a few witnessed a few times a female that she calls Starfire. Uh, and she says that they're skinnier, they're more lanky, they move different, and they don't stink. Something that I've listened to on countless times is that male dogmen have an odor. You get that feeling of dread, that kind of that primal feeling of, I shouldn't be here, I need to run. And then they get hit with this overwhelming this stench of like a wet dog and rotting meat. Um, Sasha doesn't smell like that. Uh, if I could compare her, excuse me, I got the hiccups all of a sudden. If I could compare her scent to anything, have you ever smelled like a fruit tree in bloom?
Yes.
That's exactly what she smells like. She smells like almost exactly like a pear tree that has fruit on it.
I actually had it's ironic that you mentioned that. I had a pear tree out back and we had it cut down last year because bees loved it. It's so it is I'm not a fan of pears, but I know exactly what you're referring to when you say that. So no, that's interesting. I haven't really heard too many people ever talk about smells. I have with like Sasquatch and everything, but most
Right.
people that ever talk about dogman or whatever, they don't ever really drop into like the whole. I feel like their encounters are so quick and they're usually from a distance. You don't really get the sense of smell. You don't get the sense of interaction with them like you hear with some people talk about with Bigfoot. So this one is for me a little bit different than the average one because again, it's female. You don't ever hear too many about females. And you can relate it with other things. Like you have the sense of the smell and you have some other things to it. So it's kind of a little bit different than the average. Oh, dog man ran out and chased me out of the woods.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to talk with you because when I saw that you'd posted it, I was like, that actually sounds more interesting to me personally, just because it's not your run of the mill. It ran out in the road. It did, you know what I mean? There's more variance to this. It sounds more plausible. I always try and even though I've had my own like run-ins with stuff, I've always tried to take that skeptical stance to it. Like I try not to prove or disprove anyone. But I always try and look in the back of my mind, think like, well, maybe it could have been this, could have been something else. Like, but I feel like with these, you've seen it multiple times. It's not like a mistaken identity. You know what I mean? Like you've had the experiences with it more than just once.
Right. Like I've come face to face with black bears on multiple occasions. Um, I've seen cougars. I've seen brown bears. I've seen moose and elk, and hell, I've even seen a wolverine up here. And they say that wolverines usually stay up in like Canada and Alaska. And like I said, I'm in Oregon and I've seen them down here. There are things down here that I can't readily explain as well. Like I was telling you, one of our biggest tourist attractions is Bigfoot or Wally the lake monster. But we've got other things up here, not just the wolf people that my grandma and the Nez Perce tribe talk about in this area, but we have things that I'm sure you've heard of this because most people have. But the Nez Perce tribes, one of their biggest legends and one of the things they worship is a thing called a thunderbird. Now, I've seen a thunderbird or what can be equated to one. We were out camping like most of my encounters or anything like that have been. And my grandma told me, she says, "Hey, look," points up in the air. And I won't lie, I've never seen a bird this big. Like, and I've seen a harp eagle at a zoo and California condors when we were down in California. Okay. This bird was the size of a Cessna prop plane. Like, it left a shadow on the ground so big that it absolutely terrified me. I've never seen a bird that big before, and it came right before a thunderstorm. And my grandma told me that that was a thunderbird. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you say your grandma said this, you say your grandma said this." You got to understand, like, I was a sheltered kid. My grandma sheltered me from the world because I had been abused by my mother. And in order to protect me, that's what she did. But on the flip side of it, I know more about most things than other people do because I've witnessed these things firsthand. Like, I've seen animals closer than most people have, and I can tell you about their behavior. The only difference between all this other stuff and Sasha is I don't deal with bipedal canines because most everybody else is told that these things don't exist. Also, I was never taught about this. Like, my grandma, she either wasn't alive long enough to teach me about it, and the encounter that I had when I was young was put on the back shelf because, Cody, you're not supposed to deal with the wolf people. You best just leave them alone, because everything that she said, just like everybody else's encounters, males are far more aggressive than females, and males won't think twice about killing somebody. That's what's so confusing about it, is because other researchers I've talked to tell me that what few encounters there are with females are usually in pack settings, and that they're usually mated off. Well, as far as I can tell, Sasha is solo. Sasha's the only one here. And this is a good 100 miles from where the wolf people are said to be. And it just confuses the hell out of me. But on the other hand, I'm not the type of person that's going to be like, well, I should just try to get rid of this or kill it or whatever, because she's not hurting me, you know?
I don't get the mentality of a lot of people when it comes to things that they don't understand, that they have to do harm to it. That's how human nature seems to be, though. Like, for us,
Right.
I'm not that way. Like, I don't understand something. I don't instantly want to kill things. Like, I feel bad when I run over an animal. Like, if a squirrel runs out in front of me, I try and avoid it if possible.
I
So,
don't like squirrels or cats, so I don't feel the same way about those two particular creatures. But uh but like, here's a weird instance. When I got out of jail, which I spent a good amount of time in there, and while I was in there, I had to restructure my mind, because when I was younger, I was very aggressive. I was mean. My grandma, she used to tell me that when I was young, I was a mean son of a bitch. Excuse my words. Uh, and some things that I've talked about, like my mental disorders and whatnot, were part of it. That's what made me so mean. On the other hand, after I got out, I just wanted to get back into my regular thing. So we went out shooting rabbits. Well, we finally found a rabbit and I shot it. But when I shot it, it wasn't a clean kill. And when it did its whole death throw scream thing, it broke me. I came to tears because I realized that I cared more about these animals than I ever had before. And my grandma explained to me that I had finally come to understand the value of life, not just for myself, but for everything. And that's something that she had tried to, and I guess succeeded in instilling in me, was, love and understanding for everything. And like you said, yes, basic human nature is, if you don't understand something, you should destroy it. I don't believe that way either. Because, and a lot of people get confused by this, but that's why I don't consider myself a human in the vaguest of words, because I care about everything that everybody seems to fear. And for a lot of people, that is unnerving. And that's why I live alone and why, my first marriage fell apart, and why I have a baby mama that takes care of my son away from me. And those are things that I can deal with. But when it comes down to Sasha, it's just like throwing a wrench in the cogs. Like, I can't comprehend it, because everything that I've heard or read or watched is that these creatures are supposed to be dangerous. There are very few encounters that are docile, or, dare I say, even friendly, because for the most part, the people that come forward are scared or terrified. And I feel like the people that have more mundane encounters, they keep them to themselves because they have an understanding that there's more to this world that people want to understand, and some of the people that want to understand it want to use it for bad things, and I'm very aware of that.
I think we can probably get close to wrapping this one up, but there's a few things I wanted to ask beforehand.
Okay.
Now, like, when you said you saw Sasha or whatever for the first time,
Right.
what general description would you depict her as? Like, I know I've heard a lot of different descriptions, but like, could you say she looked more wolf style looking?
So here is, I have a drawn picture of her that a friend of mine drew for me that I can send you.
Yeah, you'd
Um,
sent me that one. I'm just for the audience listening, so just to give a generalized description.
so let me think here. If you've ever seen the movie The Howling or Dog Soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
have super, in my head, super accurate descriptions of like a bipedal canine. They've got the head of a dog or a wolf. Here's the things though. Sasha's chest cavity, you know how our chests go way down?
Yeah.
Sasha's doesn't. Sasha's is about, I'd say, take 2 or 3 ribs off each side, and that's Sasha's rib cage. It's a little less bulky than ours, but Sasha right now, from the last time I saw her, which was, just a week or so ago, Sasha stands about 7 to 7.5 feet tall. And she has that stereotypical mane from her head down to her shoulders and part of her chest. Her breasts are around the same size. And she has hair down her arms, down the middle of her back, and down partway down her legs. The rest of her body has either really short fur or is hairless. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't been extremely close with her.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some people say that their claws retract. I've never seen her claws retract, especially that day that she had her hand inside my door frame. Her claws were just out there, like a raccoon's hands. At this point in my life, I'm pretty much totally colorblind. I had an injury from fighting with one of my brothers that he hit me in the head with a 2x4, but it jarred my retinal cones, and I've slowly gone colorblind over the past couple. I guess it's been about 5 years now. Anyways, when I first saw her, she was about the same color as like a more gray coyote. And I can only assume that she's about the same color now, except the hair on her head is longer. It's, I dare I say female like. It's just that longish hair. But for the most part, she doesn't make very much noise. And she's very curious is the only thing I can think of.
I feel like with creatures like this or whatever, it's hard to describe what they actually are. And I always try and ask the guests, for the most part, what they think these things are. But I know there's really no right or wrong answer because no one really knows. But do you think they're more of a flesh and blood creature, or do you think they're more of a spiritual, different realm and like existence, a plane of existence type of a creature?
So I take my description of her from how my grandma described her kind to me. The Nez Perce call them the wolf people, at least in this area. And the way she explained it to me is they're not, they're not skinwalkers. They don't shift. They don't change their form. They're just like this. And the reason for that is because they just came from a different branch. It's like, I guess there's some islands that aren't very touched by other parts of land very often, especially like the Komodo Islands, where the Komodo dragons live. There's
Mm-hmm.
not, you don't see lizards that big anywhere else. And we're not talking about crocodiles because crocodiles aren't lizards. But there's other things. There's an island out there where there was a stork that stood almost 8 feet tall, and that's the only place where it was. The only thing that I can figure is that these creatures, like Big Feet, have been here. They've been here the whole time. The only difference is that they're smarter than us and, better equipped at surviving out in the wild, which, a lot of things, like one of my buddies asked me, he's like, well, if they're natural creatures, why don't we see them like we see bear? I said, Richard, as long as you've lived in this county, how many times have you seen a bear? He says, I've never seen a bear. I said, yet I know that there are so many fucking bear out here that you can't even bat an eyelash at it. He says, well, yeah. I said, how are you supposed to say that you've never seen a bear, but you've never seen one of these creatures either and think that one is real and one isn't? That's my biggest point, is that how many people have seen a bear if you live in bear country?
Mm-hmm. I've said the same thing too. How often do you ever go out into the woods and you ever find a carcass of a dead panther, or not, but a dead cougar, and then a dead bear or anything like a predator out there? You don't ever really find a dead body of them very often.
Hardly ever.
So
I've in my experience, my whole time hunting and being out in the woods, I found one bear jawbone. And that bear jawbone was in a river stream, and it looked like it had been there for years. And who knows where it originally came from? That was just a luck and by chance kind of thing. Most of the time, especially when people talk about encountering these things, from what I hear, these people are in densely wooded areas, which to me tells me that they're in these creatures' territory. The fact of the matter is, the encounters between me and Sasha, I'm still very, very confused about it. But that doesn't mean I want it to stop or I want somebody to intervene. Like, I just want to know more facts. That's my whole shtick.
That's why I do what I do, because I've always wanted to try and find more answers to the things that I've seen. And the more that I've went down and interviewed people to try and find answers, the more questions I come out with. So the sad reality is I don't know if we're ever going to find the answers we're looking for, because every time we find something new, there's always more questions to go along with it.
And you know what? I think I'm kind of comfortable with that.
I don't know if we're supposed to know everything. I know that sounds weird. That's the one thing I do know. It sounds weird, but I don't feel like as humans we're supposed to know everything. But
Makes sense.
well, Cody, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm truly honored to have you on here to share your experience. I know you mentioned that I'm the first podcast you'd ever talked to as far as about this, so I definitely appreciate you trusting me with it.
Well, I appreciate you too. You've been quite a help for a lot of things, even just getting it out there.
That's what I try and do, is just to give everyone a chance to talk about the things that they don't feel like they get to talk about. That's kind of how I was for 17 years. I didn't get to talk about what happened to me, so I try and help other people out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you. But on that note, we're going to wrap this one up. So thanks for everyone out there listening, and thanks to Cody for coming on here and talking with me tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime.
You have a good night.
Anytime. You too.
Bye-bye. And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptic creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But oh, before gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they're hiding, the truth they won't show. Dominate our society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know